And really, the main focus for all of this is ownership, right? So if you think about the problem in a way where why does the ticket exist in the first place, right? And so, in most cases, a client asks you to do something. So what's the most important part of that? The ownership of that task. So having the ownership clearly defined on the ticket is going to be your first step to solving this problem. The status will just dictate what's happening on the ticket.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the BMK Vision podcast. Gary, I got one for us today. So I'm talking to this guy the other day, really good guy, working hard, doing all the things, maybe on the smaller side of an MSP, but still, doing good, and they're not going to be small forever. I just know that. So I'm talking to him, and we're having this deep strategic conversation. I mean, we're going in on, role definitions with some team members, finding some gaps in some of those team members' understanding of what their role is and what's really critical. And as they kind of evolve, getting those other team members, they're kind of pseudo managers, maybe they're actually real managers, leveled up. So really intense conversation, really good. And he said something about, hey, I listened to the last podcast. I loved it. You use this really funny phrase. He's just a real regular listener. Okay. So I said, well, Chris, we're getting ready for the pod here. So shoot me a question and we'll address it, so I'll put you at the top of the pile. And he's like, all right, cool. So a little while later, he writes a question, and I'd like to just read the question. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, so the question was, how do you determine proper ticket statuses and hygiene for a small team? We just went through a status overall with our managers. One wants a status for everything, observing, ready for service, etc. The other wants 4, new, in progress, waiting, resolved. And the argument came down to 3 things. Parking lot statuses become ticket graveyards. No one owns them. No one cleans them up. Visibility versus simplicity. Won't read all that. Resource assignment. Should every ticket and every status have a resource on it? Or should certain statuses like waiting on client responded, et cetera, go unassigned? So first of all, to our friend, you know who you are. If you're going to write me a question, write me a question. Don't have ChatGPT write some narration of the question. That's bullshit. I want to hear your words on that. So boo to you for that. But good job using AI to help you out. So for context, we're a smaller team, 1 service department manager, 4 techs, no dispatcher. Everyone works the queue within their tier. Do you see where I'm frustrated? Can you guess why I'm frustrated?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's devolved into a tactics kind of is the priority versus strategy. And, what really, I think what Bering McKinley is most useful for, although we can help with tactics from time to time. Um,
Yeah, fair, right? And I might even go a level up. Our standards answer this question. So first of all, Chris, ask Jetson this question. Don't ask me. But that's the wrong reaction. I'm wrong for that reaction. The reality is in the moments between talking big, hardcore tactical stuff, a moment later, his head was right back into the grind of the business, of the how we actually operate. And I think that's really important. So we'll answer the question. We'll give him a good answer on that. But I mean, just clearly you've thought about this of like, how does an owner kind of balance that? Hey, I'm working on the business. I'm working in the business. I'm having to put out fires, but I'm also trying to, work my vision operating system plan. You've surely considered this.
sure. Yeah. So the trick is to not get sucked into the day to day. And this is clearly when I'm hearing this, it's clearly the day to day people are trying to make strategic decisions on how the system works. Which is a good thing to a certain point. So, as a leader of the business, we need to design the systems and the processes in order for them to follow them. Feedback is great, but when you're so deep in the day to day as a technician, you just see things in a little less clear way. And so you want to attack the problem as you see it but ultimately that could be a trap into kind of the chaos that you're actually a part of. So having that kind of separation of, hey, this is how we want to do it, go execute that is really kind of the trade-off that you're making there, as the operator.
Yeah, yeah, it is hard, especially, kind of where we are, society 2026. It's everyone should have a voice. Everyone's thoughts matter. Everyone has great ideas to bring to the table. But in these critical moments of our business evolution, do all voices matter the same? Like, because I really love what you said. When you're a technician and you're grinding through it, you're going to solve the problem as you see it. I guess honoring that opinion versus, hey, I'm the leader here. This is how we're actually going to do it. That bridge takes some real, clarity as a leader, and great communication skills as well.
Yeah, it's tough. I think this is just the growing pain of running your own business, right? And when do you need to take that time to step out of the business to make these types of decisions is really critical. We've talked about this in the past, but my reference point here is my buddy Chad that runs a great MSP over here in Orange County. And he told me one day, he's like, "Yeah, I call it vision casting." So I go on my back porch and I just stare out into the backyard, and really just think about the business without writing anything down, without sending emails, without looking at the data in a real specific way, but just really thinking about, like, hey, where am I trying to go? How can I get there? What are the things that I need to do to put in place to achieve that? And that takes time.
You told me about that. You mentioned Chad and his vision casting sometime in the last year, and I thought, boy, that's awesome. That sounds great. Um, and I tried it a couple times. My challenge for that is not so much that I'm so busy in my business and life. It's, dude, I can't go if I'm going to walk upstairs to change the laundry. I will put my headphones in and listen to a podcast for that 7 minutes. God forbid I'm alone with my own thoughts, right? Like that, what Chad is doing is pretty amazing, at least from my starting point. It's like I'm constantly listening to something because I don't know. I don't know why I do that, but you layer in the busyness of a small business and that just constant noise, whether it's external like me or real stuff in the business. So good on Chad for doing that. How long has he been doing that?
This has been years now.
Jeez.
Yeah, so it's definitely a practice that he's perfected over time. When I was running my business, what I would do, I was a runner, so I would run usually around a 5K every morning, if not up to 8-9 miles before I got into work. And there's music playing. But music versus podcast is a bit different, right? So you get
Mhm.
lost in your thoughts, and your ideas when someone else is kind of dictating through podcasts. I think it's great, but it's really not you thinking. Music is kind of like the better position for yourself, because music will let your mind kind of wander, and you can get to a more meditative state, at least for myself. And I use that as kind of my quote unquote vision casting method.
Yeah.
And, it's like that's the trap, right? Like, we have our devices with us all the time, and there's great people out there to listen to, and so I don't think that listening to podcasts or watching YouTube videos or whatever to figure out your strategy is the wrong approach. I think you should couple that with some real downtime, as far as kind of put yourself into a sauna, put yourself into a meditation, put yourself somewhere where you've disconnected your devices and you just really kind of think about the one problem that you're trying to solve. And that doesn't take weeks or months to do. You could start that today, and maybe take a half hour to an hour to just write one problem on a sheet of paper, go into with that state of mind, and just see what you come out with.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything you said. I just heard the running part. You're like 7 feet tall, 250 pounds. There's no version where where you did not destroy your body as a runner.
Funny.
Jeez Louise,
Not
man.
quite 7 feet tall, but
Damn close. All right. Well, dang. Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of merit to that, and I certainly didn't think we would go there in this pod in this session right here. But man, I think there's so much in there about just stopping the noise and really just thinking through things. Because this isn't about how many statuses. Who cares, right? It's really about why is our system, you know, so unclear that the statuses are causing friction, right? They're unclear enough that you've clearly spent time talking with your team. The system and the reflection in the statuses. Not only have you talked to the team, you wrote a really great prompt for ChatGPT to give you a great question to ask. Um, so it's a real problem, but the problem isn't the statuses. It's that system that you have there and that clarity with the team. And I know they've been in business long enough that this is kind of a, you know, and knowing this guy, it's like, dude, there's no version you haven't wrestled with this for years already, and you've probably given the mandate, and you've probably stated your opinion. Where the real issue is, why is the team not getting the message that you are wise enough to say this is what we're doing? Why are we doing this pseudo democracy thing? Years into the game.
yeah. Yeah, because, at the end of the day, if it's 3 or 4 statuses or 5, that doesn't really matter. It's, what do the statuses actually dictate? What is the flow? What's the process to get these tickets done? And really the main focus for all of this is ownership, right? So, if you think about the problem in a way where why does the ticket exist in the first place, right? And so, in most cases, a client asks you to do something. So, what's the most important part of that? The ownership of that task. So, having the ownership clearly defined on the ticket is going to be your first step to solving this problem. The status will just dictate what's happening on the ticket. So, if you are ever setting a status without ownership, you've already lost because now nobody's accountable for it. And so it ends up being, and I think, you may have alluded to this, or he may have, certain statuses that might turn into kind of, a graveyard style thing where it's like, hey, yeah, this one is special. It's not really a real ticket. So let's put it into this certain status that kind of sits there. And then when my guys get available, then they can go attack it. And it sounds really good, right? It sounds like, oh yeah, like that's perfect. And in some certain types of departments like sales, right? Like if you have leads kind of sitting there and it's just like a shark tank where they can just kind of go in and grab the ticket. Whoever gets to it first, gets that deal. Tickets are a little bit different. So from an operations standpoint, I like to see more rigor on, okay, the ticket comes in, who owns it, and then what status does it go to?
100%. I think he said up there, so I think there's a broken system all around, uh, because what you described is exactly how I view it as well. It's that initial ownership and who owns that ticket throughout, and I think he said they don't have a dispatcher. So that's immediately, okay, you have a system problem. I just unequivocally, hands down, you are solving around that problem because we really do look for that ticket comes in, who owns it, who owns the hygiene, who owns the prep of it, who owns the pre-work, and that same person owns it throughout its life cycle through completion. Even though we're assigning it to techs, dispatcher still owns it.
That's
And
right.
having
Yeah.
those techs have to sit in that seat and worry about statuses other than the ones that directly affect them. That's just a big ask.
It is, and that's why you get to this situation that they're in, where everyone's kind of chiming in on what they think should be done because they're thinking about it in the right way. They're thinking about like, okay, these tickets come in, and we need to put it into some way that it can actually start some workflow that we can go and look at, and that's right, but if you don't have a centralized authority on who owns it at the initial, what it ends up doing is you create these really bizarre rules that say, okay, if it's from this client and this type of service, assign it to that person, and it just becomes very complex as far as like how that all that routing works. And I remember running my business that way. And it was like, for a couple technicians, and maybe one person pretending they're a dispatcher at certain points, you can get fairly far. You can get to $1 million, maybe a little bit more. But I remember talking to you. That was kind of one of our first things, as you guys were helping us kind of develop our service department. And you're like, oh, who's your dispatcher? And I was like, oh, we don't have one of those. That's a waste of money. It's, what are we going to pay someone like 50 grand to like sit there and just look at tickets all day? You're like, yeah, that's what you do. I was like, man, that seems like all of these tools should fix that problem. And what I found out, which was what we're talking about, is like, no, they don't actually fix the problem. And most of the time, the tools without a good process and a person in the seat won't fix your problem. So the dispatcher role, especially when there's 4 technicians, is probably overdue.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. It's that that clarity, right? That clarity of what is my job. And then when you joined us, that was your the drum beat that you were constantly banging is like, what is that person's job? Okay. To bill time, to serve clients. Cool. Why are you having them do all this other stuff? And that for me, it took way too long to kind of execute on that thinking. But for an MSP, I think it's probably even harder. They have many more transactions a day than we do. But that clarity to say, you're a tech, come solve hard technical issues. We'll take care of the rest. But here we've got this big blend, this Mod Podge, and especially in this person's case of these guys are trying to solve the right problem. They're bringing the best ideas they have to bear, but they're solving it in an imperfect model. And using the word perfect in there at all is wrong. Even imperfect means they're close. They are trying to solve it in a really ball of yarn model, and so everyone's doing the best they can. So I think for this person, it's step back, look at the roles, figure out what you want, what you think the flow should be. It's all in, the service domain of 50.xx.xx in the Vision operating platform. You can find your answer in there, but you've just got to sit with it, meditate on it, determine your conviction level, and then work towards that. Right, because instead you're just solving symptoms, not problems. But, the clear answer here for you of where you need to go, and I think it's gonna be hard for where you're at right now is statuses always are owned by somebody. There's always somebody owning that phase of the ticket where you are today. And those statuses are just very simple, that new, in progress, scheduled, waiting on client, waiting on vendor. You use the word queues, which makes me think you are working in some sort of, priority based dispatch model. I'll take assigned in that case as well. Anything beyond that, and I think completed and closed, right? Techs or dispatchers complete tickets, dispatchers or service managers close tickets. So there's your status list. We kind of went through, why we're trying to solve the right problem, but we're coming at it in the wrong part of the problem definition statement, and get an owner on every single ticket or on every single status. Somebody still owns it. There's no kind of hanging chads out there.
Well, let's dive into that completed versus closed, and
Yes.
what a dispatcher would do in that case, just to give some real world examples for the audience.
Yeah, sure. So using kind of ConnectWise PSA language could be different, but I think that the concept holds true. It's your technical staff is saying, I've done my work on this, I've completed my work. Now that completed status goes back to the dispatcher to say, I now finish the final step of hygiene on this. I'm looking at the time entries. I'm looking at their good quality notes. Are there configuration attached? Or is there the right agreement? Is it billable or not billable? All is the right contact selected? All of the things that are going to allow them to put it into that closed status, prepared for billing.
to help me in the audience understand why that's critical and how that expands the scope of what a dispatcher does.
Yeah, for sure. If I don't do that and almost exactly how I said it, all I'm doing is just shifting the burden down to the billing department, the people doing the invoicing. It's all gonna roll down to them, and if you're a bookkeeper, leave us a comment, get a hold of us, we'll have you on here, and you can explain it even better. When we hear and how we spot this so quickly is we just ask, "How long does it take to do invoicing?" And we hear anything from, when it's bad, it's anywhere from, a day to we're working with one company right now that it's about a 5-day process. It's like, yeah,
I'm
we've shifted all the bad habits, all the bad decisions right into that department, slowing down the thing we need most, which is money.
I'm hearing so many people screaming at their screen saying, "Billing? We're flat rate recurring. Who cares about billing? We don't even send a time,
Yeah.
detailed report to the client. Why would we care?"
Yeah. It's that fair. Keep screaming. I'll keep making money. You want it for that agreement gross profit, and y-
Okay.
and
What
I
does that
could,
mean?
yeah, that's that. In any period of time measured, what was the profit generated from that managed services agreement? Did I get my, 65%? Oh, I can't tell. My time entries suck. I can't tell. We don't always select the right agreement. I can't tell. We don't make a ticket for everything we do. Okay, got it. Now let's fix that. The other component we want is for some actual true to form root cause analysis. If that ticket hygiene is correct, I'm going to have the right types, subtypes, items on there, and I'll actually have data to say these types or subtypes of problems take this much time from that client or for that agreement or for that type of problem organization wide. So we want that for the data. And data is huge. You want to tell me you're going to get cognition and, make a chat bot or a Claude bot to go and get you great AI, or you want to use Power BI? Don't bother unless you're 95% hygienic in what you've done. Otherwise, you just have a bunch of junk in there. So fix it now,
Okay.
fix it later.
So I want to break this down really simply because like we live this world, right? We say AGP and we say all these terms like everyone knows what they mean. So when we're talking about AGP, you said, the agreement gross profit of the company, of the client that you're supporting, right? So we're taking their agreement and we're deriving a gross profit from that. Break that down for people so they understand what that actually means technically.
Sure. For agreement gross profit, AGP, we're looking for the revenue from that contract minus the hard costs, the licenses that are supported and necessary for that agreement, minus the personnel costs, the time put against that agreement in that period measured. Then we're going to divide that by the agreement revenue again, and then we're going to multiply it by 100, and that's going to get you your percentage of profitability, that agreement gross profit margin.
Okay. And what do we do with that number when we get it?
Yeah, once we get that, we now are looking at our portfolio to start with of all those agreement of that type. What was the profitability? Then we're looking at agreement by agreement, month by month, quarter after quarter, year after year. We're also going to layer in effective hourly rate, but we'll leave that alone for another time. But when we get that data back, we start diagnosing why is those so great or why is this one so rough? And we're looking for are we sending the right people to work on that agreement? Dispatch issue. Are we over servicing that client because we're inefficient? Right? Dispatch issue. Is that client just really needy? Are they utilizing more time than we predicted? You notice I didn't say bad client, pain in the ass client, none of that. It's are we over servicing them based on what we predicted we need to service them at? And do we need to recalibrate that pricing? And let's just be honest, your pricing sucks. Hey, you priced them wrong. I guarantee you, not because I think you're bad or dumb or anything like that. Just the data suggests that it's always a pricing issue. Oh, however long it takes to serve that client is how long it takes. You can't solve that. You can't pretend you can solve that. Okay? It's you priced it incorrect relative to what that client's actual needs are.
So when we get this agreement gross profit number, our target at Bering McKinley is 65%. If we're below that, um, we're looking at two factors. We're looking at the cost of labor versus the cost of ride along. Usually it's some kind of cloud service, some antivirus, some Microsoft licensing, or whatever you packaged in your per user, per device cost or whatever, right? Um, those things are looked at independently because you could be too high on both, right? So I hear it all the time where it's like, oh, we have to have all of these these software tools to include with these user licenses, because if we don't, then they don't have the right security, we don't have the right eyes on the systems, the backup's not working, all these things, right? So we want to just like pile those in. We almost use them as like a risk mitigator. It's like it's way more risky to not give these to them, so we're just going to include them, and we don't even try to charge the right price for them because it's actually lowering our risk profile. Um, and said in other ways, like there's less things that could happen to that person's computer if they have them on the computer. So that's like one way that people kind of justify a lower agreement gross profit, right? They're losing
Right.
margin on those products. On the
Right.
other side, there's the labor. What you were saying is like you're oversubscribed, right? Like you're using too much labor to support that customer, and we most likely scoped the agreement incorrectly. Is that is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Very fair.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm.
So what do we do with that? So, when we get the math working, we start to look at these agreements and we go, "Oh man, yeah, like these ones are super unprofitable." And we kind of knew that, right? Like we could feel that, but now we have the data to support that. Now what do we do?
We'll be right back with more, but first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, now it's unwinding that clock, right? And we spend a lot of time with our clients on this. It's, option A, fire the bad clients. Not a good option. Option B, go tell the clients they have to pay more. Really tough sell, right? For us, maybe not as much for the client. I think we want to pretend that every client's going to freak out and not respond well to that. Uh, so we've got two options: fire the client, go do a price increase. None of those go as smoothly as we hope they will. You've got to identify the problem and stop it moving forward is number one. With a current client we're working with right now, we're going through the exercise to say, hey, just go show me the lowest any agreement under 40% gross profit. Go gather that. They had time entry problems in the last couple of years. It's better now, so that's not reliable. So we're having to use a smaller data set. Once they get that back to us, it's now we're faced with the harsh reality. Are you going to be able to get this price to where you need it to be? Let's not even talk about can you serve it more efficiently. You probably can't, and probably not in a quick enough, time frame. Oh, it's really getting that conviction that revenue doesn't matter, profit matters. So taking that ego hit of we're at $100,000. If I hire these folks, I'm going to go down to 80,000. Cool. 80,000 a year, or I'm sorry, 20,000 a month. Sure sounds like two technicians to me. And this is kind of the cold, hard truth of it. You'll have less payroll. If we marry that up to your utilization, what's your utilization look like anyway? Is there this balance to say if we get rid of this, we also have to remove some staff. I guarantee you're not going to be able to outsell the pace of decline in your service gross profit. So we have to lose some staff. What will our profit margin, our overall service gross profit, net profit look like if we make this move? We have to ignore revenue in that decision making. You tell me if I'm wrong, Gary.
Yeah, it sounds right. Well, all there's not many levers to pull once you've actually sold the contract. So that's step one, is really knowing what you're selling. And that's the tricky part for a lot of people that are trying to mature into this, this financial model that we're talking about. Um, it's like, one, well, they won't pay that, so I can't charge them enough. I can't charge them that price. I can't charge them the $200 user. They just won't pay that. Two, I don't know how much time it's going to take to support the client, right? Three, again, back to my, software, addition to the contract. If we don't put all this stuff in, um, we're super vulnerable. So we have to just include it all, which is eroding our margins. Right. So there's all these decisions. The fourth one, which we've addressed a little bit, but I want to solve it with the dispatcher. I want to see how a dispatcher would help with this. And let's go back to kind of the statuses and where those develop into the process. Is when we're over subscribed to the customer, we're doing too many hours with them. How does a dispatcher help with that problem?
Yeah.
And second to that is, which is more tricky, is we run these AGP reports, everything looks right. Everything's 65, 70, 80%, but our bottom line still doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, the second one is much trickier. So on that dispatch piece, how do they contribute to the solution, right? We've identified, hey, we charge them what the market will bear. Our math says this should be right. We're over servicing them. How does the dispatcher help? They bring clarity to who should be working on what when. There's no version in your world as an MSP that you can't tell me a half a dozen stories off the top of your head about technicians spinning out and cycling down on a ticket where we pull our heads up and they're 3 hours into it. You, the wizard tech, look at it and say, this should have taken 2 hours. Or you might say, hey, this is something we shouldn't even be working on. This is out of scope. A dispatcher hopefully would have contributed to catching that. And we would have been able to say, this is a little mini project. This is a move, add, or change. Now we're going to capture actual revenue, take some pressure off of the agreement. But having that dispatcher in there to help identify it, putting some rules in place to say, hey, in that first 15 minutes, all I need from you is, are you going to be able to solve it in the next 15 minutes? Or is it going to take you, or can you tell me how long it's going to solve you? If you can't tell me, then I, the dispatcher, have to take that ticket back and I need to figure out how to place it in the queue and who's going to work on it when. I may need to call the owner or the service manager to help me determine how big this actually is. But that efficiency helps prevent that spinning out on the tickets that can oftentimes be a big contributor to killing your margin and quote unquote over servicing a client.
Yeah.
So
And
those are
and
just some example points.
all I hear right now is these tech first owners that, were born out of the help desk, so they totally understand it. Maybe they had a dispatcher, maybe they didn't. And they go, and they've never experienced a dispatcher that they've actually employed, going, yeah, but they don't know how to work the ticket. So who are
Yeah.
they to say what the tech should or shouldn't be taking as far as time goes? How do we solve that problem?
Yeah, I tell those guys to go F off. Okay. But no, they're going full circle into one of the first things you said. The tech's not wrong. They're solving the problem, the right problem, but they're stopping the sentence there. How will they know what I should be doing or not be doing? How do they know? They're not technical. That's the start of the conversation, not the end of the conversation. Cool, dude. How can you get them to know? Don't pretend that you as a technician are working some sort of witchcraft, black magic. I can't explain it. I just do it and I know it. Systematize how you look at the problem and figure out how to empower the dispatcher to say, hey, when you see these kinds of words, or if you actually talk to the client, look for this and think about the business impact. Right? And let's just prioritize on the business impact. Now let's see how much better of a dispatcher you are. Because tech, you're right. We never want a dispatcher even pretends to compete with your ability to know what the problem is and how long things are going to take. It's really about them prioritizing the tickets based on impact, not on how complex or how long the issue will take. I got a little lost in there. Did I answer the
No, I
question?
think you answered the first one. The second one was, let's say they run the AGP reports. Again, we're trying to find gross profit, right? And, we said 65%. Most of the time, if you have good time entry, and there's the key, you're not going to have 65%. It's going to be below that most of the time if you're having problems.
If you're having
But
problems, yeah.
what happens when you show up and it's like, hey, Josh, you said 65. I've got 75. I've got 80. Um, and then you ask them, hey, well, what's your net profit? And they're like, oh yeah, it's like 1% negative.
Yeah.
What happens there?
Whether you know what you're doing or not, Gary, you've asked me like a classic 80s, 90s SAT question, right? So it's like I don't know exactly where to start in there, but let's kind of pretend AGP is awesome. All right. And service department gross profit is less than what it should be, 55%. Let's pretend it's 46%. And now we look at our combined GP is less than the 42%. It's at 38%. All right, something else may have contributed to the low combined gross profit. Is our ratio of services to product and resold cloud out of whack? Are we under delivering profitability on those other two revenue streams of product and resold cloud? We have to answer the question of why is our gross profit wrong? Okay, our combined gross profit. When we get back into the service gross profit of like, how can that be sub 55% if AGP is awesome? Well, we have to look at the other contributing factors. Do we have the right mix of project and hourly revenue in there, bulking up that service revenue with presumably also high profit revenue? Do we have some project engineers who are underutilized, who don't really work on the agreements because you're doing a great job of controlling cost inputs on the labor side on your agreements? We've got to look at that whole mix in there, okay, of what's the quality of the other revenue in the service department that's going to help drive that service gross profit, to help the combined gross profit, to help the net profit. Now, you said net profit, so now I do have to talk about the southern half of the P&L, the sales expenses and the G&A. If we're delivering low combined gross profit, we're already going to struggle in the net profit if we're putting anything to the sales bucket or if we're spending, reasonably in the G&A. Those all are going to contribute into that. Now, were you looking for that kind of answer, Gary? Because that's a big, messy, hard answer.
It is a messy, hard answer. I think that's where people get lost. I want to go back to the AGP because I think there's an answer within that. Let me give
Yeah,
my
please
interpretation of
simplify it for us.
what can happen. So, when this is the real kicker. We go out, we sell a great contract. It's $20,000 a month. We've looked at it and we said, we believe that this is going to be, probably an hour per user per month. We're, at 100 users or whatever. So we need 100 hours dedicated to this contract for it to be profitable. We look at our AGP, we're at 85%, and we're thinking, man, we're crushing it, which is probably true on paper, right? But the question, and often I don't think we want to get to this answer, But the question is, hey, are we actually profitable? Because we're showing that the service department is not profitable, or at least to our measurements. We're also showing that the net profit is not where we want it to be, which could have other things involved. But why would the agreement be profitable? And what I've found, and this is not unique to an MSP, but with these agreements that we do this flat rate billing, we forget to service the client. And it's not even that we forget to service them. Like, we do work, we just don't track it. So when you're doing your AGP, it's not simply just taking your labor cost across all clients and doing some math on that. It's actually looking at your time entries against that agreement.
Yes, yes,
So when
yes.
a dispatcher comes in and helps you with not only structuring your your help desk, right? So she or he is, organizing it, setting the statuses, assigning out the tickets, monitoring whether those tickets are getting moved through. They're also making sure that the time entries are being put into the tickets. And that's where
Yeah,
your agreement gross profit comes from, is the time entry. And so you either are lacking time entry or you're actually lacking service. And I'll tell you, neither of them are good, but one of them is a sure way of just losing an account. Because if you
yeah,
underservice the account, eventually they're going to say, and maybe it's even the way it should be, right? They just don't call. Often that doesn't last too long. Like, if they never see you, they're probably going to say, why am I spending money with this person when I don't need them? And they might not be right there, and they might be right. We're not sure, but that's another factor of tracking that agreement gross profitability, is making sure, one, are our time entries in? Are they accurate? And do they actually define what we should be doing for the customer? And two, if they're not, what's happening? Because there's 2 points of failure there. The other side of it is like, hey, if we don't put time in, customer's still happy because, they're getting service. We don't know how much. But now we have no ability to check how much. We have no ability to know what was done last. So all of this continues to come back to kind of the core question of like, hey, what are the statuses need to be? Well, let's go up a level and say, well, who actually even controls what those statuses are, and who owns that initial ticket? So I think this just continues to come back to, hey, who is your dispatcher?
yes,
So
yes. No,
that's, for Chris,
that
that's what I think. Go and spend an hour in that meditative state and say, just write it down. Who is my dispatcher? You're going to have an answer. And then based on that answer, how do I solve the problem of I don't have one?
right. No, that's yeah. First of all, I failed the SAT question because I didn't read the question close enough. It's that high AGP that was the kicker in there, right? So that getting that dialed in so you can say, what's my min max? Where do I see where should I be worried that I know we're spending more time with that client, it's not in here. Let's get back up to root cause. The guys are too busy. They're not entering their time. I'm not seeing very many tickets. Somebody's not making tickets for them. And yeah, all roads lead back to dispatch being just a beautiful solution in there. And
Well,
yeah, I
it's,
think yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
It's interesting is, as I kind of review all of our vision clients and their financials, so it's funny because in the same way that you went down the P&L, right? You talked about, okay, the AGP, well, that's going to affect the service department gross profit, which is going to affect the gross profit or combined gross profit, right? So you're working through that math, and what's true, what I see is the majority of the time everyone has that math besides the AGP. They, because if you pull up your QuickBooks or whatever accounting package you have, it gives you that. And, if you're doing it right, like you're categorizing things correctly, you're going to get these numbers that will make sense, right? You're putting your labor up in COGS for your service department, with your dispatcher and everyone else that's actually working service. You're getting these answers, and whether they look good or not is kind of based on how your company's doing. In our example, we aren't doing well. The AGP does not show up in your P&L. In fact, the AGP doesn't show up at all unless you have one component to this whole thing, which is time entry. And so as we look at our financials, our AGP calculation and our time entries are at the bottom. And I don't know how many clients I look at that just totally don't put that data in
Absolutely.
because it's not giving it to them,
Right.
right? Like it's something
Right.
you have to go and get. And when you go and try to find it, and it would be interesting to kind of go back and look at these clients, what their dispatching looks like. But when you go back to find it, it's like often, okay, our time entry isn't good. Our labor isn't being accounted for because of it on our agreements, or maybe our agreements are malformed. So it's interesting that you answered it that way, because that is the logical way of going through it based
Right.
on what we see most clients do.
Right.
But if you're in the business of managed services and you've sold these contracts that are kind of, fixed bid, user based, whatever the thing is, which is the majority of us, right? That, and it's the majority of our business. It's like, well, you haven't put together the components outside of just simply selling an agreement that actually makes that agreement make sense. So whoever made up this whole managed service thing of like, hey, just charge per user, per device, and just do a flat fee, and it'll all work out in the end because you'll just have 1 million of these. And, whoever decided all that forgot to tell them what was the most critical part of it, which was tracking their cost in a specific way in order to know whether or not what they said was true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not bad that you sell managed services at a fixed cost or fixed price to your customers. That's not inherently bad. But it is bad if you don't actually monitor the contracts in a way that makes sense.
Yes.
And it gets very confusing when you look at your books and you're like, why am I not making money? It's like, well, look at your agreements. That'll tell you why. And
That's right.
usually it's obvious.
Yeah, Gary, that just I'm an old man now. I've done this 23 years, and not a real fear, but I could easily say my biggest fear in the context of my life's work and MSPs as a whole is that I exit this world and still only about 15% of MSPs can even define what AGP is, let alone actually measure it and play with it. It's just this pervasive problem. It's so terrible, and I feel bad for people. It's like when I was younger, I probably judged them and mocked them. Now it's just like, dude, I just feel bad for you. The biggest part of your revenue, the biggest chunk of revenue that you are aiming for, you actually have achieved, is recurring revenue, and you don't even look at the profitability, right? You don't even look at it, and when we gets introduced to you, we have to fight tooth and nail to get you there, and it's just like, and maybe it's just too hard to look at. Maybe it's just too painful to look at. But those that do, they crush it. They absolutely crush it.
I don't think you're right. It is hard, and you are right. Like, it will be a sad day if you retire and it's still 3% of the companies out there that know what the hell AGP is.
Right.
But I think it's a framing issue. I watch Alex Hormozi all the time, and he's just he's got great content, and one of the he talks about his content. He sometimes, like, he goes kind of off script, and he'll talk about like him developing his content. He said, yeah, my job here is to make all of these, because he talks about business and business development, mostly around marketing and sales, but, operations too. And he said something the other day that I thought was really right, is like, he's like, yeah, I'm here to break this thing down to be as simple as possible. Now, he said that in one video, the video I saw before, he simply just broke down what revenue, gross profit, and expenses were in costs were in a business. He just broke it down very simply. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Like, it's such a simple message. And then he said why he did it. And why he did it was, he's like, yeah, no, people don't actually know what this means. Like, it's not good or bad. It's just the facts. Like, people start businesses without understanding financials. And, talk to any parent out there and say, hey, what would you like your kid to learn as early on as possible that you never were taught? It's like 90% will say personal finances. It's like, still 2026, it's still the same thing. We never were taught personal finances, and then ask them what their biggest problem in life is. It's generally personal finances. So it's like, it's our job, I believe, is in Bering McKinley, is to kind of teach people what the financial playbook is and to break this stuff down as simple as possible for them to understand. And so I think, you raising your hand and saying, hey, I wish I could teach everyone what AGP is. It's like, yeah, no, that's exactly right. If people can understand this and understand the makeup of what this is, then the decision to set the statuses a certain way or hire a dispatcher, it has a real reason.
Yeah.
It's not simply, I need to route this ticket to make sure my tech does it in a certain way, like a little bit, but like if it's affecting your financial, like if you can show where on the financial it actually affects that because you have the statuses right and because you have the dispatcher in, now you're tying together the full package of, hey, there's a financial impact or consequence to the business if we don't get this right. And the simplicity of actually getting it right is really clear if you understand.
Yeah. Two parts to that. One is, last year around this time, we were running this webinar series. I'm pretty sure we converted all of them onto the channel here. But go look for the video called You Suck at Managed Services. But before you watch that one, watch Managed Services Sucks. Okay, watch them in that order. Managed Services Sucks and You Suck at Managed Services. Watch those, study those, nerd out on them, and you'll understand even deeper why Gary just said what he said. Right? I think that's important. Those are there for you. Go watch them. Coming back to Chris here, an exercise that I would encourage him to do is anytime you're faced with these pieces of your model, go through the exercise of just asking yourself, why do I care? Why does this matter? Right? And you'll get your first order thinking out of the way pretty quick. It's the second and third order that's really going to move the needle for you. And where kind of spoiler alert here is if you think about this long enough, you're going to get to say, why do statuses matter? And nearing the end of that mental journey, you're going to get to be able to tie a pretty straight line to profitability. Everything's going to be because I want to increase the profitability. Right now, our minds might be thinking better client satisfaction, smoother ticket flow. It doesn't feel as chaotic around here. Those are good, but those are just kind of, yeah, we should all expect that, right? But you're going to be able to get to that place of saying anything I think about why and see if you can stay in that thought process, that mind frame to take it all the way down to profitability. And then you're going to be challenged with how do I see where my profitability is on this thing I'm trying to solve for? And that's going to open up a different branch of the tree to say, what else do I need to fix in order to get a clear picture of the profitability so the thing around the statuses actually starts to matter in a meaningful way?
Yeah, that's a great exercise. I'd like to add something to it to maybe provide a little bit more clarity too. So when I think about how to run a business, on one side of it is the financials, right? So whether we're talking about gross profit or net profit or expenses, whatever's affecting that P&L, I want to know, right? So like I want to understand, how does this problem affect the P&L? The other side of the problem is, how does it affect operations or potentially sales or marketing, right? So when you look at it through the lens of both of those, because you can answer okay, we have too many tickets on the board. Here's the clear, easy way to solve that. Just hire a bunch of techs. Dude, if you had 10 technicians versus 4, you wouldn't even worry about status because it would go from new to close in 15 minutes every time, right? And, I think everyone's bright enough to understand, okay, well, that doesn't work because, like, how do I get the money to do that, right? So again, back to the finances, right? So you can't just raise your expenses to infinity, otherwise you go out of business. So there's a balance between operational excellence and financial excellence, right? So many times we make decisions without thinking about the financial impact. And if we do, it's something like, I can't afford it, or, oh, I have so much money because I sold a new account, right? We talk about top line, and then we talk about what my perceived profitability is without ever really digging into whether that's true. And the mature company will look at both and say, how can I maximize my operations while minimizing the financial impact to the bottom line? That's the mature way of looking at this. And it's not as hard as it might seem. Like that I can guarantee you. But if you can answer both of those questions of how does this affect operations and how does it affect finances? And by the way, there's no perfect answer. It's always a trade-off. As you increase operational excellence, you typically will decrease the financials to the point where there's equilibrium. Right? So like we said, oh, well, we need to hire a dispatcher. Well, guess what? Your bottom line just got decreased by 50 grand a year.
Hmm.
Or
That's right.
your gross profit got decreased by 5 points. So, but that's okay because you're not getting operational excellence without it. So in the other way is like, okay, I don't want to pay a dispatcher because I want to keep my gross profit high. Well, how long will that last until it breaks and then clients leave, which affects your revenue? Right? So you have to think in both of those terms in order to make the right decision. That's the way this works.
That's right. That's right. And that really kind of comes down to, Chris's original question. That was a tactics question, right? That was tactical and it makes sense. And it's very easy to get consumed in all of those tactical decisions you have to make every day. The point is or the goal is to build systems that allow you to not get consumed by those tactics. Okay. There should be these little sprints or moments of time where you say, my strategic plan says I need to attack my service delivery model. We already determined that happens in Q2 of 2026. Here's our 2 or 3 initiatives. One of them is to solve the riddle of, broken service delivery. Those action items in there are to design a system that answers the question once and for all. As again, this is not the first time, Chris and his team have wrestled with this issue. And likely, if he doesn't zoom out and say, how does this fit in my strategic plan? It won't be the last time. This is a question that, if we got to meet everyone on day 0, this would never be talked about again until we were scaling and said, does this model still work now that we have 50 technicians? What do we need to tweak? So it's really how many times do you want to go through these tactical decision-making moments and how disruptive are you going to allow them to feel? When really the answer can be pretty clear. It's roadmap it out. Take that 10, 15, 30 hours to build your plan around those milestones and goals and find the home and the moment to solve that problem. Okay, you're behaving like a bad MSP right now serving a client. We're just reacting. Well, that's why they hire you, the MSP, to stop reacting, model out what good looks like, and execute on that plan, meeting their budget and their time frame, just like you have to do for your own business to solve the operational challenges that you have.
Well said.
Right on. Well, that was fun, Gary. That was we definitely kind of took that in some fun angles. Chris, I think if you listen to the middle part of this, you're going to find your answer. I think we called it out pretty clearly for you. Keep asking those good questions. We're getting more and more emails every month, every week, and we like kind of working through them. That's a fun format for us. But make sure to like and share and subscribe if we earned it. Leave a comment below. Tell us where we're off base or some story that you have around that. But otherwise, we'll catch you next week. Bye.